Hello everyone, welcome to Jolly Molly TV. Today we're going to work on another fun part in Kimberbell's Candy Cane Lane bench pillow slash table topper slash wall hanging project. Now if you're doing this as a bench pillow, today's video will just be informative for you to learn some different techniques and tricks on how I'm going to be doing my version of this. The next step that you're going to need for doing the bench pillows is the border video, which we will be doing in the next video. But you might want to watch today and see if you can learn some little tricks and design techniques of what we're going to do to make my version of this project. So I hope you stay tuned and watch this. Let me show you what we're going to be doing today. This is the pattern that we've been working on. We have done all the light poles, all the trees, all the houses, and the treat stand. And we have worked on these 8 by 8 inch finished, which were 8.5 by 8.5 inch cut pieces of fabric, and we've quilted them and they are ready to be assembled into this project. We have 4 of those. Today we're going to be focusing on the center of this project, which is basically 16-inch square of little 2-inch square blocks. Isn't this going to be fun? So this is going to be a border, which my B's missing there, got cut off, but this is a border of 1 inch finished, okay, which will be 1.5 inch cut, and these are 2-inch square finished, which will be 2.5 inch cut. And this is what we're going to work on today. We're going to work on cutting out pieces of fabric, assembling them in a really fun, unique way where it's kind of unique and all the colors aren't together, and then adding a border around that. Then after we have assembled this piece, this will go into the center of our project, and then we will sew all those together. So today's project is to work on this center part. All right, so let's just go ahead and go to the table and let me walk you through what we're going to do to cut these pieces and get this assembled. Okay, so now for this next step, since we're going to be doing the center, we're going to be cutting 2.5 inch squares. I just showed you on the pattern where it's 7 across and 7 high. So I went to my stash and I pulled up the fabrics that I had used in these blocks. And I want to pull fabrics that are going to match with the color scheme but not really be too busy. So these are the fabrics I pulled back out. I did not go with this kind of an oil slick right here or the sprinkle because I thought it might be a little bit too busy. But I did pull the stripe from this house because it has all my colors in it. Then I pulled a green fairy frost from my stash because this will pull colors from here, and also the house. I used that color thread in the house, so that would be a good square. So I did those. Then my border blocks, my 8-inch border blocks, I did, if you remember, in this fabric. And that's cute because it also ties in to all the colors there. And then I pulled the Cinderella Blue Fairy Frost. I pulled this fabric, which I'd used in the Christmas tree. And then I also pulled, put that one aside for a second, I pulled the pink with the swirls with the heart and the purple that I had used in the houses. Then the pink that has a glitter on it, I want to use this for the border because this will kind of tie everything out and be a nice border around the outside. So we needed 7 fabrics for the inside. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All 7 of these, I'm going to cut 7 squares, 2.5 inch squares. All right, 7 of them, 2.5 inch square out of each one of these. This I'm going to cut the border out of, and we'll do that in a minute. So I'm going to set this one aside and we will tackle that one, but I want to save it so I don't accidentally cut it in these. But these are the 7 that I think would be really nice for the center. This one will give a little bit of motion. This one gives a little bit of fun. Will tie into everything. And this one I could do like all of them straight up and down, or I could do one straight, one sideways, one straight, one sideways, and kind of give it kind of a wonky feel. But it ties all of the colors in for the whole series. So that's what I'm going to cut. So pick your fabrics. You need 7 of them, and cut 7 squares out of each one that are 2.5-inch square. All right, and then I'll meet you back here. So once you have all your little pieces of fabric cut, the 2.5-inch squares, go ahead and lay it out in a pattern that's appealing to you. What I did was I took that striped one, it's striped fabric. I decided I wanted that to be in the center of my pattern. So then I just kind of put more of a solid next to that on each side, and then some glitter, and then I put the other kind of a print pattern off to one side. And all I really basically did was I did this first row, and I kind of decided what order I wanted the fabric to be in. Then I repeated that. So basically the second row starts with this one and then goes back to the print, and you see I get the diagonal lines all the way across on each one. So it just basically transitions and goes down, and just follow that through. Isn't that pretty? I like the way that looks a lot. I really do. So this is going to be the layout for the center of my table topper. So now what I want to do to make it easy to sew is choose either to go up and down or across in a row, and take your top one, whoops, and put it on top. I'm going to go down the row. So that will be number 2, number 3, 4, etc. And just pick them all up and then put them in a pile. That's row down number 1. Do the same thing with each row, keeping them in order. So now I know that is going to be row number 2, and continue on. This way I'm just going to keep them in the order that I need to sew them in, and I will stitch or sew together one row at a time. Okay, just continue to do this for the whole thing. Then we're going to go over to the machine, and we're going to stitch them together, right sides together, and we're going to do a 1/4-inch seam, and we're just going to sew these together. Okay, so it'll be fun, it'll be pretty when they're all done. So once you finish piling up your piles here, one more row like that, that is the order that I want to keep these in. So then what I'll do is I'll go over to the machine. I'll just take one stack at a time, go over to the machine, sew that together in a row, and we'll walk through that. So let's take your first pile and walk over to the machine, and let's get started sewing this together. Okay, we're at the machine, and now I've got my first stack of little squares that we're going to sew together. And if you remember when I pulled them in the direction of top to bottom. So that's how I'm going to sew them. So the only fabric that I have that's directional is the stripe, and I'm going to make sure that this one is attached down here and go down the row. See what I'm saying? So this one, I want the stripes to be up and down, not sideways. So I'm going to sew and attach the second square right to the bottom of this one, and I'm going to sew them together with a 1/4-inch seam. So I'm going to put these aside. I'm going to flip them over, okay, and I'm going to attach them with a 1/4-inch seam. Now you can pin them if you like, or you can use clover clips, but because it's only one square, it's going to be really easy to just line them up and keep them together. Now I went ahead and I put a 1/4-inch foot on my machine. Okay, so it's going to make it really easy to line this up and get a nice 1/4-inch seam. So I'm going to go ahead and line it up and put my foot down. So now I'm going to just stitch all the way down. Just keep the thread lined up with that guide on your 1/4 inch foot, and you're good. Go back a few steps and cut the thread. Okay. So then this looks just like that. It's going to be cute, right? Okay, so now I'm going to do the next one. I line it up, put it where I want it to be, and I'm going to turn the fabrics over right side together, and then I can line them up just like this and do the same thing. Go ahead, come here, put the foot down. I'm going to sew a couple. I forgot to backstitch the other ones. It'll be all right because eventually they're all going to get sewn together, so it'll lock and be just fine. But I usually like to do it anyway, where I do a back stitch just to lock them into place. Okay. All right. So there we go. We're on a roll. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. Oh, this is a directional fabric too with the lollipops. So I want to make sure that I have it going the right way, which is the little stick coming out of the lollipop. Okay, so I'm going to flip it and do the same thing. Line this up. Turn it, and we're going to line it up there, and let's stitch. Back stitch a couple, and let's go to town. Just keep that fabric lined up with the guide on your 1/4 inch foot if you have one, because that makes your life a lot easier. Back stitch a couple and trim the thread. All right, so we're looking good. So let's fast forward and let's stitch the rest of these squares onto this first strip. Okay, so isn't that cute? So now we have the first strip all sewn into place. And in my direction, it was up and down. So now I'm going to do the same to all the other piles, the 6 other piles that we have. I just want you to sew them together in strips. All right, one after another. You can do this, all right? And we'll meet back here when they're all sewn together. Okay, so now we have all of these done. Isn't this cute? All right, so now what we're going to do is I want you to take these over to the table. Let's meet over there, and now we're going to press these seams in different directions so that we can sew these strips together. So I'll meet you over at the table. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I just want to lay this out and make sure that I have stitched all my squares in the right order before I sew them together, because I wanted that kind of a diagonal here with these stripes going all the way down, so then each one's going to form that diagonal. So if we did something wrong at this point, it's really easy to fix. Not so much later on. So we want to double check this at this point right now to make sure that we're in line. So I got my stripes going down the center, then my purples, then my blues, then my lollipops, then my greens, then my pinks, and the turquoise. And again, the turquoise up here, the pinks going there, the greens going across, the lollipops, the blues, and the purple. So we are good. We have everything in the right spot. So then I'm going to, take this off in the exact order that I have it. Just put them one on top of each other so they're in the correct order. Okay? All right, so we got this first one. We got these all lined up. This one's ready to go, and I've got my iron warmed up on medium setting. And what we want to do now is we want to turn this over, and we're going to be pressing the seams in the same direction on row 1. Okay? So it doesn't matter which way you start. You just got to be consistent for the rest of the rows. So I'm going to go ahead, because I've got this one started here, I'm going to do all of these seams going in the direction to the left. Okay, and you can tell I'm really not putting the iron and moving it to stretch the blocks. I'm just basically lifting and pressing and lifting and pressing, because I really don't want to stretch the block, so to speak, and a lot of movement back and forth would do that. Okay. All right, so now I've got these, so then I'm going to go on the top, just wiggle a little bit just to give it a nice press, and we are looking good. Okay, so we've got this row, which is row number 1, pressed upwards. Okay, pressed up. Leave that one off to the side. Bring in row 2. Line it up, make sure you know which direction's going. And now that we've got this first row with the seams facing up, I want to do this row with the seams facing downwards. Okay, so I'm going to flip it over this way, and I'm going to put the seams facing down. And I always tend to go right to left. It's just because I'm right-handed. So I just turn the strip in the direction that I need to do it. Except I got the iron on the wrong side, because it gets in the way of the camera. All right, so now I'm pressing the seams again that way. This looks good. Give it a nice little press again on the top. Okay, so those are going down. So I can double check it. I've got these going up and those going down, which is what we want to do. Now, row 3 is going to be just like row 1. I want them to go up because, again, I want to do it opposite of this one. So I put the row in the direction that I want, and I want the seams to go up. Okay? So if the seams go up, I want it like this. Okay. That way I'm kind of always putting the seams in the same direction. I just turn the strip to be how I want it, and my brain doesn't have to think, oh, is this up or is this down? I just do it in the same direction that my brain is used to doing it. I've just turned the strip in the right direction. And worst case, what if I did it wrong? That's okay. You can just turn it around and press the seam going in the other direction. Not a problem. See, I've got those, so they're opposite. Okay, so that's great. So now I can go ahead, move these over just a little bit. Okay, now this one, the seam's going up. So I want to take this one, line it up. Same way, if the seam's going up on this one, I want the seam going down, which is just like, here we go. Triple check it, seam going up. I want the seam going down. So then I press in this direction. So it's really not that hard once you get the rhythm going and you know which direction you need these seams to go into. And like I said, if you did it the wrong way, it's not that hard to fix it. Like this one, if I'd accidentally pressed it that way, oops, I turn around and I press it that way. So that's not a very difficult thing to fix. If you happen to do it the wrong way, not a big deal. Okay, give it a little bit of a finish on the top. Lie it in the right position. Did I do it right? Okay, we got one going down, or actually one going up and one going down. So those are in the right position. Scoot that over a little bit. Bring in the next. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for the last 3 rows. So let's fast forward and let's press these seams in the right direction. Okay, so now let's double check this one. Make sure I've got it in the right direction. I do, so we are good. So now I want you to put this back in the order that you're going to sew it in, either left to right or right to left. Mine is going to be left to right. All right, like so. Okay, so now we got them all in order. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get ready to go back to the sewing machine, and now we're going to sew these strips together. Okay, and then this is again your chance to double check and make sure you've got that angle thing going. And now I'm going to put the seams, we're going to sew it together right here. So I want to flip it over and do right sides together. And if you see, this is where doing the seams the opposite direction really will help you nest these together. So if we put it together and you're a little bit too far away, you're going to feel like a little ridge in between those two seams. You don't want to have a ridge. You want to push them together so they nest right up against each other. Okay, right up against each other. And then I put a clover clip to hold it in place. You can use pins too. I just prefer to use clover clips because they don't poke me so much. It's all about, you know, not having pain and not getting blood on my project. Because with pins, I just have a klutzy time with them. So I use clover clips whenever humanly possible. Okay. So I'll just keep going all the way down. Again, I'm nesting those seams. You don't want to feel them doubled up, and you don't want to feel a gap in between the two of them. So you keep going until you feel them absolutely flush. No doubled up fabric and no gully or ditch in between the two of them. Okay. So now we got one last one to do. All right. Oops. Might help if you got both fabrics. Again, when in doubt, double check it. Come back and reclip it. Okay, so those are the first two. So then all I'm going to do is when I go back to the machine, I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam all the way down this side. Okay, then I'm going to do that again with the next two. All right, so this one and this one go together. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing. Let's fast forward and put these seams together. So now I've got the second row together. Now let's do the same thing with these. This one and this one. Got my diagonals going. Let's fast forward and put these together. So now we've got these. Don't worry about that little guy. Put him on the bottom. Put that one there. And this is the second one. And the first one. So now we are ready to go over to the machine. Let's meet over there and let's sew these strips together. So now we've got all these. Let's bring up the first one. And again, all we're going to do is we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure the first block's lined up. And then make sure as you get to each one that your seams on the bottom are going in the same direction as everyone else. That way your seams won't get snarled up and sewed in accidentally the wrong way. So I can just feel it. Okay, we're good. And let's sew these down. Again, 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, and we'll do our back stitching to lock it in. Earthquake. Whether you guys heard that or not, but that was an earthquake. Little baby one, but an earthquake. All right, let's get the other ones out of the way. Okay, let's go back to sewing and hope that doesn't come back again. All right, here we go. Then when I get close, I'll stop, take the clip up, and continue sewing until I get to the next one. Clip up, put my finger there to hold it. Okay, get myself repositioned. Okay, clip up. Okay, and stop, clip off. Yeah, everybody's going in the right direction. Take the clip off here. And stop when I'm getting close. Take the clip off. And then this one's not totally lined up down here, so I want to move that just a little bit and sew through the rest of it. And then back stitch. Okay, and there we go. Let's check it out. Okay, pretty close. Put that up. Pretty close. Yep, I'll take it. Yeah, and what I'm just doing is I'm looking at these points to see whether I got the seams close. This one's off just a tiny bit, but I can live with that. This is not a show quilt. This is just something for me to enjoy. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done, right? All right, so let's fast forward through and let's sew together the other sets. I'll take it. Like I said, doesn't have to be perfect. Close enough. The blocks are lined up. The edges are lined up. If they're off just a smidgy, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so now we've got those 3 strip sets sewn together. So now we're going to connect and sew these together. Now this is also going to be important that we make sure that we've grabbed the right sets and that diagonal is created in the design. So I just open these up and make sure, yep, these are the right ones. So now I'm going to flip this over and make sure I've got the right edge. Again, I'll just pop this up. Make sure I got that diagonal. Yes, I do. All right, so now I'm going to do the same thing we did over at the table. I'm going to nest these seams together and sew them together. Let's do this. Okay, so now let's open this. Check to see. That one's off a little bit, but this one's lined up well, and that one is too. So I'm going to go with it. It's good. All right. Okay, so now I've got diagonal going in the right direction. Wait, got myself turned around. All right, this diagonal, or excuse me, this stripe is in the upper corner. So I didn't want to get myself turned around there. All right, so now we're going to grab the next set we did and make sure that diagonal is coming straight across, which it is. So I'm going to flip this side together and do the same thing. We're going to nest the seams and sew it together. Let's do it. Okay, so let's take a look at this. 1, 2. That one's off just a smidgy. That's okay, but this one's lined up and that one's lined up. So that's good. We'll take it. Yeah, and if one of them gets so far off that you're not happy with it, you just undo that stitch line that you just made and reattach that seam that you don't like and then continue forward. So it's not that hard to take it out. If it's way far off and you didn't do it right, not a problem. Just take your seam ripper and undo the stitch line that we just did and then go forward from there and reattach it. Okay, we've got one left. It was this lone little strip that didn't have anybody to attach to. Well, now it does. So again, make sure my diagonal is going in the right direction. Flip it over and let's attach it and get this sewn on. Let's check this one out. Close enough for government work. I will dig it. How about that? Isn't that cute? I love it. All right, so now let's take this over to the table because now we have to press the seams on the back as well. So let's meet over at the table. Isn't this cute? Okay, we're not done yet. Let's flip it over. And now we need to press these seams. And there's different schools of method on this. Some people will press their seam just to the side, one way or another. Others will press it open. And I'm part of the press it open group because I want to try to get this as equal, flat as I possibly can. Because the next step in this project is we're going to quilt this, just like we quilt any other fabric. So I am going to press it open. Now this is a little bit more tedious, but if you separate the fabrics and you press it open, this will give you a flatter seam in the middle. And you have to do one at a time. And make sure you keep the seam underneath it, the original pressed seam, when we sewed it together in the same direction. Just flatten that out and then separate the seam in the middle and then we're going to press it open. This takes a little bit longer, but the machine will thank you when it comes time in a little bit to come and quilt the top of this. It's not going to have as much bulk in this little square, because if you see this way, it's got fabric doubled up from here. This one's got fabric doubled up from here, and then you've got 2 more layers of it on top. So that gives it a bulky intersection right there. So the machine will have to work harder when it gets to that corner, which would be every single corner. This way, there's less bulk in there, so it'll be a smoother transition for the machine. So again, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to go right up, and we're going to do this for the whole thing. And this is what it's going to look like when you're done, is you're going to have a flattened seam. You're going to have a nice flat seam there and not as much bulk in that point. So let's fast forward through this and let's press open all our seams. You've opened all your seams. You've got it as flat as you possibly can. And it looks so good. So good. All right. Turn off the iron, flip it over. And isn't that gorgeous? I love it. Absolutely love it. Give that another little press. Look at that. It's much flatter now. So now we're going to go over to the machine, and now we're going to quilt this, because the rest of all the blocks that are going around this all have a quilted background. Now we want the center to also be quilted. So now let's go to the machine. I'm going to walk you through how we're going to quilt this. This is going to be fun. All right, let's go. Okay, so now we're at the machine. So let's load the design. I have a Embroidery machine just for reference in case you have something similar. You can follow along. I'm going to click Embroidery. Going to go to my flash drive. Going to go to Candy Cane, which is where I put all the designs. And I'm going to go to my quilting background. Okay, here they come. For this center section, for all those little squares that we just sewed together, it measures approximately 14.5 inches by 14.5 inches. Okay, measure yours and see what size yours comes up to be. It should be very close to that measurement. So in that case, we need to pick a design size for this center section. Now, again, it's 14.5 inches. So I'm going to go for a design that's 14 inches up and down, including the tack down stitches. We're also going to have to do this in 2 sections because there's no design or hoop that's 14 inches wide. So I'm going to do a 6 by 14 design first. Then we're going to come back and do another hooping, and I'll show you how to add on and do an 8 by 14 design. Okay, so we're going to do the 6 by 14 first, because what we'll do is 6 and 8 is 14, and then this gives me 14 inches up and down. So it'll just fit, and we should be fine with a little bit of cushion so we don't cut off the design. Okay, so that's going to be cute. Look at that, gingerbread, mints, holly leaves, candy canes. That's cute. So we're going to click Set, and then we're going to click Embroidery, and we are ready to go. Okay, so before we go back to the hoop cam, go ahead and cut yourself 2 pieces of batting. You need 1 piece that is going to be 7 by 15 inches, 7 inches by 15 inches, and you need a second piece that's going to be 9 inches by 15 inches. Okay, so 1 piece that's 7 by 15, the other that is 9 by 15, and that will be the batting that we'll use for these blocks. Okay, so go ahead and cut those, and then I'll meet you back here at the machine. So let's go to the hoop cam. I've got white thread on the top of the machine. I've got a full bobbin down below, and I've got my large hoop. This is my 9.5 by 14 hoop, and then I put in a piece of the poly no-show mesh stabilizer in the hoop. So now, you ready? Let's go ahead and stitch the placement line for the batting. Here we go. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and cut a piece of my batting. This is the same warm and natural batting that I've used for the rest of the project, and that's going to give us just enough to attach this down with cushion on both sides. So I make sure that I have everything covered. I can bring that up a little bit more, and we are good to go. So lay down your batting. Let's put the foot down, and let's tack down the batting. Okay, so now we're going to take the hoop off the machine, and we're going to take it over to the table, and I want you to trim away all of this excess batting. Okay, so we're back at the machine. That's trimmed up nicely. So now let's stitch out the placement line for the fabric. White thread still on the top of the machine. So now we got the placement line in place, and I wanted to show you here, move this over just a little bit. This is the placement line. And I've got it positioned at least 1/4 of an inch above and 1/4 of an inch below at the bottom. So now what I want to do is I also want to scoot this straight over, so I'm about 1/4 of an inch past that placement line. Okay, so I'm just going to go over. I'm right on the placement line, And now I'm going to go over about 1/4 of an inch. Make sure, lift it up. It looks good. It can tack it down. Again, I'm 1/4 of an inch above the top. And I'm 1/4 of an inch below the bottom. So now I want to switch and put the thread that I want to quilt this design in the top of my machine. And I have this amazing variegated thread. Can you see it there? It's just going to be so pretty. It is a Superior Threads. It is a Fantastico. And pardon the bright light for a second here. Here we go. That makes you can see the thread a little bit better. So it's a Superior Threads Fantastico 5024. And look how pretty this is going to be. This is going to be so pretty on this. It's going to be amazing. So that's what I'm going to put in the top of the machine. Let's turn the light off. There you go. And that way we can quilt this with this amazing variegated thread. So pick a thread that you would like to quilt your fabric. You can choose to have a thread that pops on your fabric. You can choose to have a thread that will blend in and only be noticeable when you go right up to the fabric. Or you can do what I'm doing and pick a variegated thread, which is going to do both. You're like, do both? How does that work? It's going to blend in more with the printed fabric designs and will stand out and pop more on the solid color fabrics. Isn't that going to be cool? Okay, so I've got the variegated thread up on top. I want to triple check my fabric and make sure I've got 1/4 of an inch on all sides. We are good to go. And I'm going to use this stylus to help me keep this down as it goes through because I want to try to keep it as flat as possible. Okay, you ready? Let's tack down the fabric. And mind you, this doesn't have to be perfect because what will happen at the end is you can actually take out this stitch line on both sides. In fact, you'll definitely want to be taking this one out. But this is just to hold the fabric in place while we do the quilting designs. It's not something that you can leave in there permanently. You can if you want, but you don't have to. In fact, this I'm definitely going to take out because it's not going to be hidden in the seam allowance. But this way it'll keep the fabric down while we do the quilting. Okay, we ready? All right, let's do the quilting. I've got the variegated thread up on top. This is a 10-minute stitch out in real life. So let's sit back, relax, and enjoy the quilting. Here we go. isn't this amazing? I love how it turned out. Look at this. Oh, that is so cool. Let's try to turn a different light on it here. Nope, that light shows it the best. Look at all this. So it pops when it gets to the more solid, and then it blends in with the printed, kind of blends in as well. Gives like a frozen look on the glitter ones, or the glitter fabric. That is so pretty. All right, I love that. Isn't that cool? All right, so now we've got the first part done. What we need to do now is we need to take this over to the table, and we're going to use a seam ripper, and we're going to take out all of the stitches on this side, which was the tack down stitches for the fabric. We want to take those out because we don't want those in the design. Then we're going to trim the stabilizer just up to here around the side and get rid of all this excess, because we're going to do a second hooping where we're going to quilt this section. So I just want to clear out everything up to the fabric. We're going to square the fabric off later. I just want to trim the stabilizer up to the edges and get it free and clear so we can come back and do the same thing again, but this time we're going to use a slightly larger size. This was a 6 by 14. And now we're going to use an 8 by 14. So this is where you're going to use your piece of batting that you cut that's 9 inches by 15. That's what we're going to use for this next piece, okay? So let's go ahead and take this to the table. Let's fast forward and let's get this baby ready to hoop again. Okay, so we want to switch designs because now we're going to be stitching out the 8 by 14 design. So let's go back to embroidery, flash drive, go back to candy cane and the quilting designs. And now we want to look for the 8 by 14, which is right here. And that's the one we want to pull up. Isn't that cute? It's a little bit wider, so we have a little bit more quilting in there. So let's click set. And we don't have to do anything to it. So we click embroidery. And we're ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave the variegated thread up on top because we're not going to use that much in putting down the placement line and the tack down stitches. So I'm just going to leave that thread on top. And let's stitch out the placement line for the batting. Okay, so it's kind of cool how to see the variegated looks on the white too. All right, so let's put the batting down, cover all that placement line, foot down, and let's tack down the batting. Okay, so now let's take the hoop off the machine, take it over to the table, and we need to trim away all of this excess batting. Okay, so now we've got that all trimmed up. So now let's put the foot down and stitch out the placement line for the fabric. So now I've got the fabric lined up on top of the batting. Now I want to make sure I have a 1/4 inch on the bottom, the left side, and the top. And I also want to make sure that the batting's not going to line up exactly, but what you're looking for is the stitch line. See, when it stitches the design, it leaves about a 1/4 inch from the edge of the batting, and that's as far as the stitch line is going to go to the right. So I want to make sure that, yes, I've got about a 1/4 inch on the right side of the batting. The batting comes to basically where this line is, so the quilting won't overlap in the middle, and I've got a 1/4 inch on each side, so we are good to go. All right, and if you have to take the hoop off the machine to get that lined up, that's fine. Just remember that your batting may overlap a little bit on the edge, but it won't be when we're all done. But that way your stitch here, it's not going to overlap. Again, the machine's only going to stitch up to, if you look at your right side, it leaves about a 1/4 inch. See this here? Of where it did not stitch. So knowing that, I want to make sure that this stitch line is about a 1/4 inch away from that, and then I still have a 1/4 inch over here, and we're good to go. All right. So use your hands, your stylus if you need to. You can tape the fabric down if you want. We're going to tack down the fabric first, and then we're going to stitch out the quilting. So you ready to go? All right, so foot down, and let's, oops, might help if I had my latch down on my hoop. Okay, now we have a green light. So let's tack down the fabric. Let's see where it wants to go. Okay, we'll stop it right there. Let's get the fabric back down nice and flat. Make sure I'm lined up again. And I'm going to kind of help it into position, foot up, move it back underneath. All right, here we go. Stop it if you need to make sure that you get this tacked down flat, okay? Okay, now don't worry, this kind of a tack down stitch, kind of a basting stitch, went and covered up some of the quilting. Don't worry, because we're going to take that out again, just like we did on this side. That's just to hold the fabric in place. And they're large basting stitches, and you'll just be really careful when you take those out so you don't hit the quilting stitches behind it. Okay, you ready? You got this. We're almost done, and we can do a happy dance. So we've got a 14-minute stitch out here. So let's fast forward and enjoy it. Here comes the quilting stitches. All right, you did it. You did it, you did it. All right, so now this center section is all quilted. Look at that. Okay, so let's take the hoop off the machine. Let's take this over to the table and let's finish this up. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this out of the hoop. There we go. There we go. Put this out of the way. Isn't this the prettiest thing? I love the combination of the fabrics and how it turned out. So pretty. Okay, so now what I want to do is I just want to trim away this excess of the stabilizer to get it out of my way, to make my life a little bit easier. Plus, we've got big pieces here. We can easily use this excess stabilizer in a 5x7 hoop, or even sew the two pieces together from the 2 blocks and use it again in my 8x12 hoop. Easy. We don't want to waste that because that's money, that's supplies. Okay. And these 2 smaller ones, we could sew those together and use these in a 5x7. Okay. So don't waste your materials. That's good materials that can be used and save yourself some money. We go through a lot of stabilizer when we do machine embroidery. Isn't that cool? I love that. That is so pretty. And the spacing, turn this around a little bit. Yeah, the spacing worked out well. We don't have any double overlapping in the center. That's cool. So now I'm going to take my Jack the Seam Ripper and I'm going to very carefully take out the spacing stitch, the tack down line in the center, and just make sure that you don't hit a quilting stitch. If there's a stitch that's by a quilting stitch, skip it, go to the next one, and rip it from that point. Okay? Because like I said, you don't want to get the quilting stitch. Very carefully here. There we go. So sometimes you just skip a stitch and go to the next one that you can safely grab and not touch that quilting stitch. Okay? So let's fast forward through this and let's get this basting tack down stitch out of here. Okay, here we go. I love it. You did it. Dun, 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 dun. Congratulations. Look at that. Look how cool that is. That is amazing. Okay. You can also take this one out on the side. This one right here. I won't make you sit through this on camera, but go ahead and take this one out on the side as well, because it won't be hidden by your seam allowance. And it actually lies pretty flat. We on the back, you have a little bit of overlap on this batting. So what you can do is you can trim this batting right here out as well. So it lies perfectly flat, but there's just a tiny bit of a ridge there. So just trim out this little bit of batting right there. Isn't that amazing? You did it. It looks so pretty. Well, I hope you had as much fun today as I did making this centerpiece for our candy cane quilt project. This has turned out so much better than I had planned. I love it. So I hope you come back here again and watch the next installment here on Jolly Molly TV, where we're going to be working on the borders. We've got 2 different types of borders to work on. One that's going to be a border to this block and the outside borders, and then we're just going to sew it all together. So we are almost done. So thank you so much for joining me. Please subscribe to my channel And hit that bell notification and click the like button because YouTube likes to see if people are liking the video. And I will see you here again next time on Jolly Molly TV. Until then, happy stitching. Take care. Bye-bye.